Katie McIntyre, and I'm your host for the podcast, The Loving Cup, Elevate Your Gratitude. Today is Tuesday, February 13th, 2018, and I'm live from the FingerLakes1.com studios in Seneca Falls, New York. So welcome. So in the words of late President John F. Kennedy, as we express our gratitude, we must never forget that the highest appreciation is not to utter words, but to live by them. And I thought that was a very fitting quote for today's guests. So I'd like to welcome my guests, Leah Ntuala and Ed Chase, both of Seneca Falls. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I like to start off with having my guests introduce the other. So Leah, would you introduce us to Ed?
Sure. It would be an honor. This is Mr. Ed Chase. He has lived in the Seneca Falls community since the early 1950s. Moved here with his wife, and they had their children, Scott and Deborah, here. Ed is an engineer, World War II pilot, and the engineer that created our library, and he is a member of the congregation where I serve as the pastor. And Ed is still the man that we call if there's a problem with the boiler.
It's a wonderful introduction. Thank you, Leah. Ed, would you introduce us to Leah?
First of all, thank you, Katie, for having us on your program. I'd like to introduce Leah Ntuala. She is the pastor of our Seneca Falls First Presbyterian Church. She has very impressive credentials, and I'll have to refer to my notes because I don't remember all of them. She has a BS degree in social work from Ohio State University, a Master's of Divinity at the Union Hospital, Presbyterian Hospital Seminary in New York City. She was a chaplain of the New York Presbyterian Hospital, joined the Peace Corps, and served in Kenya for 18 months, where she met her husband, Simon. She was called to the Seneca Falls Presbyterian Church in either late 2010, perhaps early 2011. At the time of her call, she was an associate pastor at a Minnesota church. She resides in the church manse on State Street with her husband and two young sons. She has been a terrific pastor and is very active in the community, all community activities, really. She's a good friend and wonderful person.
Perfect. Thank you, Ed. So let's jump in and talk about gratitude. So if you can think about the past year, can you share something with me that you're most grateful for in the past year? And either of you can go first.
Go ahead, Ed. You have your answer.
Well, feel the most grateful in the past year for me has been the support of family, friends, and neighbors that I received before and after the death of my wife.
An outpouring of love for you. Yeah. Leah, how about for you?
For me, I continue always to be grateful for good health. I've changed several of my behaviors based on the population of people that I serve, my parishioners, giving me good advice about skincare and health care, and Ed teaching me that you've got to stretch and exercise every day. He still does that. And gets disappointed he doesn't have the balance he had as an 80-year-old, I think. And so I'm just very grateful for that. You can't take advantage of, you can't take it for granted.
It's true. And I think I love that there's lessons from your parishioners back to you. So it's
all the
circle.
time.
How about for your whole life? Is there one thing that jumps out?
Well, my whole life is getting close to 95 years here, coming up later this month. As I think back over the years, there are so many things that I can be grateful for. But I think I'm going to have to put a couple in the number one category. I think having parents that raised me as a Christian, in a Christian home, along with the sacrifices they made in providing for me. And I grew up in the Depression years, and times were hard and very difficult. So I give great credit and am grateful for my parents. They did, I think, a pretty good job in raising me. The other thing that I must put in this category also, I'm very grateful for a good and loving wife of 71 years.
It's beautiful. 71 years is amazing.
It is amazing. And they made that 71st year. She passed away a few days after your wedding anniversary. Mm-hmm. I guess for me, I'm most grateful for in my life is all of my teachers who have taught me to put to make all my life match up. So I do find your quote that you started the show with from Kennedy to be very appropriate, because when I think about teachers such as Mr. Chase, one of the things that makes him a good teacher is he prays in his actions with his whole body. It's not just in the words, it's in the way he contributes. And to share a short story about Ed is Ed, when he was, I think, about 89, there was the microburst that took place in Seneca Falls, and State Street, the Manse, had a couple really large trees that literally were just ripped from the ground, and one was this gigantic one which landed on our neighbor's porch, but the other was a smaller one, but it was right out in front of the yard. And I have only one child at that time, and I've never been through a microburst, and Ed comes by in his car and sees the tree and says, "I'll be back in a minute." He goes home, grabs his goggles, his earplugs, and his chainsaw, and then comes back and starts cutting up the tree into logs. And I said, "Ed, let me help you," because I'm in my early 30s. I was like, "Ed, let me help you," and he's like, "No, I've got this." I've never felt so small and yet so grateful, because I never run a chainsaw before in my life, but that's who Ed is, and so those teachers. I'll always be grateful for those moments and those teachers in my life. So, but Ed, there he was. That's Ed Chase in my life.
A man of service.
A man of service.
So how about if you talk to me about what you're most grateful for in each other?
I respect Leah a great deal. She's done a wonderful job, and she's a very caring person. She ministers wonderfully to the Presbyterian Church congregation. She's a great asset to the church and to the community, and she's a wonderful friend.
Very nice.
For me, it was Ed's wife, Bobby, suffered for about 12 years with a diagnosis of Alzheimer's. And Ed was her primary caregiver throughout that whole time. And there was a moment early on in my coming that they were no longer able to make it to church every Sunday. It was too difficult. She did not get up and moving that early in the morning. And so I would visit them in their home. And the generosity of spirit. I can't even begin to put into words that I would come home and tell my husband, boy, I hope that's how we always treat each other. And not just when we're 80 and 90, but that generosity and kindness of spirit. I don't know that Bobby always knew who Ed was by name, though she seemed to retain that pretty well. But the kindness and generosity, she knew that just emanated from the way that they interacted with each other. And he was always kind and gracious. And I can't express my gratitude for that lesson and for being a witness, bearing witness to that, is something I'll carry with me forever.
I had the chance to meet Bobby too. Ed introduced me to her. We did a project together for the bank. So I'm grateful I had the chance to meet her and to spend time with Ed and her. So sometimes we cry on this podcast. I'm feeling like maybe we might do that a little bit. So I'm not sure that I shared this question with you, but I would love to hear if there's something that you're grateful for now, but at the time you were not grateful for it. So it's one of something in disguise.
Well, I'm thinking a little bit about my World War II experience, I guess. Certainly, I wasn't grateful for having to fly in combat with the Germans shooting at me. But I learned a great deal from that as to how people respond to stressful situations. And I guess I feel that it was a very maturing and experience. And I did receive a lot of benefits from being in the service, including the GI Bill, which allowed me to go back and finish my college degrees. So that at the time, I guess I wasn't very grateful for being in the service, but from the benefits from that have been very beneficial, and I certainly am grateful for all the things that came out of that, and particularly able to go back and finish my college degrees, which before I went in service, I had to work my way through at 25 cents an hour during the school year, and I stayed there at the college 35 during the summer months and got 35 cents an hour. So I'm really grateful that I got the GI Bill, and it provided a way for me to finish my education with very little stress and strain.
That's great. And so then you had a degree in engineering?
I started the college in a college in Missouri because I had really no money. Come out of the Depression days. In fact, we were still in the Depression days up in our part of the country until World War II came along. But I was able to work my way through at the college in Missouri, and I had intended to stay there only a year because I still wanted. I didn't know what engineering I wanted, but I knew I wanted to be an engineer of some sort. So, but after the first year, the war came along, and I decided to stay there until I actually joined the Air Force Reserve because I wanted to be in the Air Force. and fly if possible. So when I came back from service, I went on to pursue my engineering degree at Iowa State University under the GI Bill. Mm-hmm.
And then how did you get to Seneca Falls?
How did I get to Seneca Falls? Well, when I graduated from Iowa State, I was hired directly by the vice president of Sylvania at that time, and they brought me, or put me at Emporium, Pennsylvania. So I went to Emporium, Pennsylvania, and we were there only a short time. They were hand producing. At that time it was black and white television tubes. So this was a temporary operation in the warehouse of the receiving tube division at Emporium, Pennsylvania. We were there a short time and then moved up here to Seneca Falls when they bought out, Sylvania bought out the old Rumsey pump plant. And I've been here ever since. We worked for 3 companies doing the same job. We retire from one company in Friday and go back to work for the next one on Monday. So we went from Sylvania to a merger with General Telephone, became General Telephone Electronics, and then from there we went to, the division was sold off to North American Phillips. So I worked for the 3 companies doing essentially the same job as manager of facility engineering, which was a very interesting job in my mind anyway, and what I felt at the time. We got in on the ground floor of the television tube industry and went from black and white into color. It was very interesting to go from virtually hand-built glass tubes to metal tubes and to color tubes, which was a completely different process. So it was, Seneca Falls was a jumping place, and at times we employed as many as 2,000 people over here at the plant, wow, which is about 500,000 square feet in floor space.
And that was what you took care of, those 500,000 square feet of floor space, right?
I'm sorry?
In your job, you were responsible for all of that floor space and everything that happened inside.
Well, I wasn't. I was in the division engineering, and I had a small, highly specialized group where we did the facility engineering, and we also interfaced between the plants and the corporate facility office, who were the architects, and the engineers were that actually prepared the plans. And I was involved in following up the construction and in facilitating the needs of the plants so that they could get the facilities they needed because they kept expanding and going into automated operations as we went along. Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm glad to know just a little bit about the story of how you came to mm-hmm. be in Seneca Falls too. So thank you for sharing that. I know it was a long answer.
I have a number of people who ask, how in the world did you get from Iowa to Seneca Falls?
Yeah. It works. Leah, is there something that jumps out for you that you're grateful for now that you were not grateful for at the time?
Probably some of the rejections that I've had. Like not getting a job as a pager at the Ohio floor, to be like a page runner or whatever, like those sort of opportunities. But what I learned in the process, even though I was heartbroken for some of those rejections at the time, was to not be my own no. So to apply anyway, even if I don't meet all the criteria, even if I don't hit every last bullet point when I look at an application or an adventure or opportunity, it taught me that I don't want money or lack of self-esteem or an inability to be brave to be a reason I don't try something. So all those moments, which add up. I mean, there are lots of them, but those rejections are some of my greatest teachers, and I certainly was not grateful for them at the time. And my brothers and sister can attest to my lack of gratitude for them at the time.
That's good. I love that. I love that you don't want to be your own barrier. That's great advice. So can you both share something that is a favorite memory that you have of Seneca Falls, or something that you've experienced in Seneca Falls?
Does one jump out at you? You have many more memories of Seneca Falls than I do, Ed. But
yes, I do. Well, when we came to Seneca Falls, there was still, 49, which it was very difficult to find any housing. My wife and I were lucky to find an apartment of 2 rooms, and with an ancient gas stove that came over with Columbus, I think, with an Italian family. And initially, there was a mass movement of people into Seneca Falls, and there was a little bit, you could tell, of resentment from the natives, as we call them. We were foreigners that had moved in on them, and it took a while to blend in and become accepted. As we went along, of course, things improved, and in a year or so we got into a decent apartment, and then from there into a rented house, and from there into a building our own house, which we did on One Leland Drive. And by and large, it's been a very pleasant experience to me, because I grew up on a farm in Iowa, where the nearest neighbor was at least a half a mile or more away. And I liked that kind of an atmosphere. As a youngster, I grew up hunting and fishing, and this provided the opportunity here in this area. I was offered several jobs in the city, in Chicago and in Boston, but I turned them down because there was no place there to hunt or fish. This was one of my primary interests. And so I felt that Seneca Falls was really the place for me to be, and it's really been a very enjoyable experience, really. I can't say enough for it.
Love it.
It's interesting is that it's a very similar answer for myself. I would define myself as a city girl. I like the anonymity a big city offers, but my husband grew up in a very rural environment and didn't really want to live in a big city, and Seneca Falls provided us that happy medium. While it's not a large community, there are so many opportunities that are granted here that you would find in a big city. I feel our library is on par with any large city library. The proximity to music and arts, even here with the sculpture trail, and the amount of work that this community has put into providing services for the people that are here, speaks volumes. And I think it goes back to something I remember Ed telling me once, that when he did work for Sylvania, they were expected as employees of the company to sit on boards in the community, to do community service, to provide, to be involved and not just live in a house somewhere, but to be a part of the community. And you can feel that here. In many ways, my husband grew up, because he grew up in Kenya, he grew up in a very similar kind of upbringing to what Ed would have. What they weren't going through depression, but people certainly didn't have access to many things. You relied on your neighbors to help you. You traded, you grew your own vegetables, you milked your own cows, you had your own chickens. In many, many ways, my husband grew up much in the same way that Ed did. And so he felt at home here, and it provided that nice balance for both of us that made us want to stay here. So it's amazing to me that the answer is the same.
Perfect. It's perfect. Is there anything else that you want to share today?
Well, I noticed one of your questions was about if we taught our kids gratitude, and I grew up with parents who insisted that we respond when gratitude was due. And my wife the same way. My wife was a Presbyterian minister's daughter, and very well trained as well. And we have taught our kids gratitude, and if they get a gift, they write a note pronto. And some of this has been passed along to their children, although I can't say that for all of them. But things are so much different today, and you're lucky if you get an email sometimes. But my grandson particularly, anything he gets, he immediately get a handwritten note of gratitude. And I think this has been passed along in our family at any rate as best it could be. And I'm grateful for that.
It's an important lesson. Anything else you want to share, Leah?
No,
okay.
I don't think so. I think Ed just said it all.
Okay, perfect. So before we wrap up, I just want to again say thank you, Ed and Leah, for coming in and sharing some of your wisdom and your words and your experience. It's a treasure. I really appreciate it. So that does bring us to the end of our time together, and I'm just grateful for Ed and Leah for spending some time with us and sharing their voices. And let's all just take a lesson from Ed and take a moment to send a handwritten thank you note. It is very, very powerful, and the people that receive them appreciate them. We heard that firsthand from Ed. So that's my assignment for you today. And with that, we'll be back next week with 2 more guests for the Loving Cup, Elevate Your Gratitude. So go out and share your gratitude with the world. See you next week.